interested members of the public to provide input pursuant to Executive Order 14,067 of March 9th, 2022, ensuring responsible development of digital assets.
Thanks for the comeback, good buddy. What's your handle?
Responsible in accordance with who? Hunter Biden? Or who? In particular, the department invites input, data, and recommendations pertaining to the implications of development and adoption of digital assets and changes in financial market and payment infrastructures for United States consumers, investors, businesses, and for equitable economic growth. Comments must be received on or before August 8th of 2022. You can submit comments via the federal e-rulemaking portal at regulations.gov and follow the instructions on the website for submitting comments. In general, all comments will be available for inspection at regulations.gov, which we'll start taking a look at for sure. And comments including attachments and other supporting materials are part of the public record. Do not submit any information in your comments or supporting material that you consider confidential or inappropriate for public discourse. It's a protection for consumers and investors and businesses in the United States. Of course, they're going to use protection of United States and global financial stability and the mitigation of systemic risk. I hate that word systemic because I feel like it's overused and abused. Mitigation of illicit finance and national security risks posed by misuse of digital assets. Reinforcement of U.S. leadership in global financial system and technological and economic competitiveness. Including through the responsible development and payment innovations in digital assets, promotion of access to safe and affordable financial services. Yeah, let's make that third party though, bro. Support of technological advances that promote responsible development and use of digital assets. Section 5A provides that increased use of digital assets and digital asset exchanges and trading platforms may increase the risk of crimes such as fraud and theft. That is the FUD they're going to throw at it. Other statutory and regulatory violations, privacy and data breaches, unfair and abusive acts and practices, and other cyber incidents faced by consumers, investors, and businesses that are irresponsible and don't control their own keys and want daddy government to take care of them. The rise in the use of digital assets and differences across communities may also present disparate financial risk to less informed market participants or exacerbate inequities. It is critical to ensure that digital assets do not pose undue risk to consumers, investors, or businesses, and to put in place protections as part of efforts to expand access to safe and affordable financial services experienced by more vulnerable populations. You're too stupid to do this, therefore we will tell you how to do it and where you can do it. Section 5 directs the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of Labor and the heads of other relevant agencies, including, as appropriate, the heads of independent regulatory agencies such as the FTC, the SEC, the CFTC, federal banking regulators, and the CFPB, to report to the president on implications of development and adoption of digital assets and changes in financial market and payment infrastructures for United States consumers, investors, businesses, and for equitable economic growth. The report must address the conditions that would drive mass adoption of different types of digital assets and the risks and opportunities such growth might present to United States consumers, investors, and businesses, including a focus on how technological innovation may impact these efforts and with an eye toward those most vulnerable to disparate impacts. Through this request for comment, Treasury is requesting input from the public and will inform its work in carrying out its mandate under Section 5 of the Executive Order. Don't mandate my crypto. Look, if we want to go through due process of all of this and essentially be able to have public discourse Cool, we have public discourse here, but I already have a response to this, which is that a mandate should not be put into order through an executive order, and that it should be done through our traditional checks and balances. I think that's pretty much how I'm going to start to construct my comment, okay? Request for comment. Treasury welcomes input on any matter that commenters believe is relevant to the Treasury's development of the report of the implications of developments and adoption of digital assets and changes in financial markets, market and payment infrastructures for the United States consumers, investors, businesses, and equitable economic growth as directed by Section 5BI of the Executive Order. Commenters are encouraged to address any or all of the following questions or to provide any other comments relevant to the development of the report. When responding to one or more of the questions below, please note in your response the numbers of the questions to which you are responding. In all cases, to the extent possible, please cite any public data related to or that support your responses. If data are available but not public, describe such data to the extent permissible. So A, adoption to date and mass adoption. What explains the level of current adoption of digital assets? Please identify key trends and reasons why digital assets have gained popularity and increased adoption in the recent years. Yeah, increased adoption is primarily due to the allure of price and increase of one's economic status primarily, but tertiary to that, and more importantly, it is being able to transact without the interference of governments or banks, of which you are, so you should not participate in this regulation. Who are the users, consumers, investors that are adopting digital assets? Everyone in the entire world, but primarily, like the idea, once again, is to be able to transact without any interference. What is the geographic composition and demographic profile of consumers and investors in digital assets? What businesses are adopting digital assets and for what purposes? I mean, we could go into, of course, electricity companies, power providers, and the purpose is to strengthen the grid and reduce waste of power. What are the main use cases for digital assets for consumers? To transact without the interference of governments or banks. What are the implications of equitable economic growth? It's a Trojan horse that's going to collapse the nation state and you'll be crying in your bed at home. Factors that would further facilitate mass adoption. The crash of the US dollar. Describe a set of conditions or preconditions that would facilitate mass adoption of digital assets in the future. The crash of the US dollar. To the extent possible, please cite any public data related to the responses above. Public data includes the final acceptance of what will be a coming recession into a potentially a depression that you keep denying. What developments in technology, products, services, or markets account for the current adoption of digital assets? What developments in technology, products, services, or markets account for the current adoption of digital assets? I mean, as far as developments in technology, what you're seeing is due to, of course, the mining potential. You have increased and accelerated the development of computing hardware, right? Are there specific statutory technology or infrastructural developments that would facilitate further adoption? Yes, of course. Green energy. Well, that would provide, of course, the ability to mine and validate transactions on the network. Opportunities for consumers, investors, and businesses. What are the main opportunities for consumers, investors, and businesses from digital assets to transact without the interference of governments or banks? Potential benefits of decentralized and disintermediated systems. You can't print your way out of debt while putting the burden on the American people. Create a creation of new types of financial products and contracts. Yeah, products and contracts that are without the interference of banks and governments. Potential for improved access to greater ease of use for financial products. With great power comes great responsibility. And yes, greater ease of use could be an argument, but for the most part, not your keys, not your crypto, and you should learn how to participate in the new digital transformation. Potential opportunities for building wealth. It's a lot less about building wealth and a lot more about stopping others from building their own wealth off of the back of your work and skills. Potential benefits of interacting with counterparty suppliers, vendors, and customers directly. Being able to interact directly without having to pay a portion to an overseeing body that is bloated and crumbling at the seams. Potential for improved cross-border payments and trade finance. Yeah, we can basically get rid of borders because we can transact with anybody because we don't have to have the approval of a nation state. General risks in digital assets, financial markets. Please identify and describe any risks arising from current market conditions in digital assets and potential mitigating factors. Identify as any such responses that directly relate to market transparency. Bitcoin's a public ledger. It is completely transparent, more transparent than any other fiat system in existence. Accuracy and reliability of the market data. Thanks to mining, the accuracy is pretty on point and secure. Technological risk, including attacks, bugs, and network congestion. Most of this is due to end users as well as centralized exchanges. End users not being educated on how to control their own crypto, and of course centralized exchanges by shutting off their consumers' access to their funds. Smart contract design and security. Smart contracts, obviously, as we've seen, are the most vulnerable. That's why Ethereum is the most attacked network and where most people lose a majority of their money. Settlement and custody. You better self-custody, not your keys, not your crypto. Jurisdictional and legal conditions. There should be no jurisdictions, sanctions, or anything of the likes in relation to cryptocurrency. Risks to consumers, investors, and businesses. Please identify and describe potential risks to consumers, investors, and businesses that may arise through the engagement with the digital assets. Identify any such responses that directly relate to frauds and scams. I mean, nothing is any more fraudulent or a scam than the U.S. dollar. Losses due to theft, taxes. Losses of private keys, not your crypto. With great power comes great responsibility, and that is your responsibility. Losses from failure, insolvency of wallets, custodians, or other intermediaries. If you have an intermediary, you are not participating in crypto properly. Potential losses associated with interacting with counterparties directly. No, this is the way it should be done. And then you should be able to do your own due diligence. Disclosures and amount of fees. Disclosures and fees are transparent, and you can see how much in fees you're going to spend before you spend them. So, pay attention to what you're doing. Disclosures of relevant terms. Well, this is important if you're centralized. Authenticity of digital assets, including NFTs. Authenticity of digital assets is obviously a problem, and this needs to be worked out in smart contracts. I don't think that it'll be solved anytime soon, but once it is, of course, we'll have the new revolution of NFT marketplaces. Ability of consumers, investors, and businesses to understand contracts, coding, and protocols. Well, they got to do the work. Impact on the most vulnerable. According to the FDIC's 2019 How America Banks survey, approximately 94.6% of U.S. households had at least one bank or credit union account in 2019, while 5.4% of households did not. And roughly 25% of U.S. households have a checking or savings account while also using alternative financial services. Can digital assets play a role in increasing these and other underserved Americans' access to safe, affordable, and reliable financial services? And if so, how? Well, yes, it can, because thanks to blockchain, you are able to essentially just download something onto a cell phone, which last I checked, you can get for free at this point from the U.S. government through taxes. But that aside, essentially, you would be able to transact. You don't need approval from a bank or anything like that. Everything's verified on a public ledger. In your responses, please describe specific ways in which digital assets can benefit the underserved and most vulnerable vice traditional finance products and services. Yeah, without the control, without the control of banks and governments and so on, the ability for someone, even without identity, like an ID card or something like that, can transact, right? Obviously, they want to change it to where you do have an identification verification process, as they state here. And I think that that would be a miss, and that should be not something that is approached within the mandate. In your response, please describe specific ways in which digital assets can pose a risk to underserved and most vulnerable given rapid developing and highly technical and the nature of the industry. I mean, the biggest factor is going to be what kind of regulations you put into place that is outside of our traditional checks and balances. The term mass adoption is defined as a scenario where digital assets are accepted and used by U.S. public on a large scale. For example, mass adoption of digital assets as payment method would translate to use and acceptance of cryptocurrencies as a common and regular payment method for goods and services. The term digital assets refers to all CBDCs. Regardless of the technology used and to other representations of value. Financial assets and instruments or claims that are used to make payments or investments or to transmit or exchange funds or the equivalent thereof, that are issued or represented in a digital form through the use of a distributed ledger technology. For example, digital assets including cryptocurrency, stablecoins, and CBDCs. Regardless of the label use, a digital asset may be, among other things, a security, a commodity, a derivative, or other financial product. Digital assets may be exchanged across digital asset trading platforms, including centralized and decentralized finance platforms, or through peer-to-peer technologies. There you go. This is the Federal Register, Stick Shark, and I highly recommend going over there and putting in your request for comment. The whole process is there. This is in relation to Executive Order 14,067 and what regulations they're going to be putting into place. My primary argument here is that it shouldn't be a mandate that is done through an executive order, but it should go through our traditional processes. But that's me in general. There you go. Did you guys enjoy that? Only regulation I think would be helpful is something around stablecoins. There should be a rule where they can only label themselves a stablecoin if it's being audited and shows proof of backing. Proof of backing is a little tough too, right? So, I mean, like I said, I kind of understand, like, once it goes out into the fiat system, then regulation comes into place. I think we've had that argument a few times. Sometimes I think it's a moot point because I think at the end of the day, the entire system should be replaced. I mean, a lot of people say that, and a lot of people also say that people that say that are crazy. So I understand that, but you know, I'm a Bitcoin psychopath. What can I say?